Welcome everyone to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. We are recording live on Twitch, so I will be following some people in chat sort of talking about cards as well. But we have a couple of new cards. I think 5 to 6 have been spoiled today by Scarlatch in the Discord. We're not doing another mechanic today. It's just a bunch of new cards from the set, which, as we all know, has more than 300 cards in it, and is called the Dusk Road. Just a bananas huge set with a lot of really interesting stuff. We've already seen Knight and Ally, and there is another Knight card in here, so if you are not aware what Knight does, you can we can summarize it real quick. Basically, anything that triggers Nightfall will cause it to be Knight for the next 2 turns, and when it is Knight, you will draw an extra card and take an extra damage during each of your draw steps. So good stuff. And now we're going to be talking about the 5 cards that have been added to the list. I haven't had as much time to look at these as I have the last set, but I am pretty excited about some of them. And amongst them we have a pretty fun, just sort of cutesy rare called Topple Tower. So this is a 0 for 3 cost red, and this is a rare that you kind of want to draft around in a in a draft deck, basically. So if you get it, it is a 0/4, and then it has +2 strength for each Grenadin in your void. So the basic idea here is that the more Grenadin you have, the bigger your Topple Tower is. And that's a pretty simple, pretty straightforward effect. At 4 health, this card dodges Torch. It is, however, monocolored, so it's not super immune to removal, and I think it's pretty easy to kill in ranked. Probably will not make a lot of appearances there. However, because it has +2 strength for each Grenadin in your void, if you can find some way to give it, say, charge, that's actually a pretty decent amount of things. And as I was talking about how little time I had to look at these, I was in fact reading that as each Grenadin in play. But it is in your void, and that's actually a bigger deal if you want to give this card charge in a ranked deck, because there's a lot of ways to get a lot of Grenadin out onto the board, and if you can get them killed, then Topple Tower actually gives you some really interesting options with, say, Warhell. That being said, I still think that that's not going to be any sort of S tier deck. It'll be very unlikely to help you climb up the ladder, but overall, I think that it'll work out just fine. So yeah, we do see a card that is going to be very exciting in draft, because this card is just going to be a very, very big card that really likes Grenadin. A lot of times it's going to be a 6/4 for 3, which just off of an assembly line, that's not a bad deal in draft. This is a really exciting draft rare, and I don't actually have too much to say about it. I think that the art on it is fun. I think the name is fun. I think that in general, Eternal just has been knocking it out of the park on aesthetic design and on just sort of getting the flavor right with these cards. And that is really important to me, because I really want Eternal to succeed as sort of a visually appealing and interesting story-based set. And I don't know if all of that was there in the first 2 sets. I think that this is actually something that has been consistently improving. Their art has gotten better. A lot of their mechanical and story design has gotten better, and you can really see how the game is improving with each set just from simple card designs like these. And I really do like that. And I think that Topple Tower looks like a fun draft rare that we'll definitely see play in some very, very silly and fairly bad decks. So pretty cool stuff. Let's look at the next one. What do we got? Cowardice. All right. So Cowardice is a curse that says the cursed unit can't block. Now this is essentially a bad permafrost, but as an uncommon semi-removal card for an aggressive shadow deck, it is something that you will see some play with in Limited, which Limited is Draft, or at least the code name for Draft that we often use in Magic. It also stands for sealed deck formats, or any sort of format where you don't have access to a lot of cards. In those instances, bad uncommon removal or bad common removal is generally a lot better, because removal is just really, really important. So that's always nice to have. This card does deal with a lot of different threats. You can use it on basically anything. It doesn't stun the unit, so you can actually use it on Sandstorm Titan and use it to get past Sandstorm Titan, which is kind of cute. Now, as to whether or not this card will be used in Ranked, that's an interesting question, and one that we're actually going to have to address a little later on in this particular set. So, we do have a new legendary here that cares about curses, and in addition to that, we also have a card that cares about curses that is another Unseen in the same sort of legendary style. So I can see a deck being used that uses this curse in addition to Permafrost just to set up a high amount of sort of aggressive curse-based aggro. And, or, yeah, just curse-based tempo could be a thing. And there's a lot of evidence to support that, I would say. We are seeing a lot of new curses, specifically in this particular pack of cards. And we're going to be looking at all of those in just a second. Okay, I just lost the spoilers there. All right, Dusk Road. There we go. So yeah, like we've already seen Mirror's Nightshade, who is the 3/2 that has +1/+1 while an enemy is cursed, and pay 5 to play Nyctophobia on the enemy player. And if you are using Mirror's Nightshade, then you get a 4/3 for 2 out of these small curses. And that is actually a really reasonable tempo jump if you're playing a decent amount of cheap curses. Permafrost and the other one do actually activate it because, of course, units are considered enemies. I had some people commenting on my YouTube spoiler breakdown that Permafrost worked. I actually included a picture of Permafrost in the Mirrors bit, but I don't think I specifically mentioned it, so I will mention it now. Permafrost works with Mirror's Nightshade, and getting +1/+1 while the enemy is cursed is really good for making an efficient aggro unit. So if you have aggro units that care about curses, if they're unseen, and then you also have a bunch of curses, that might be a deck. So we'll see if that actually comes to pass. Other than that, I don't think that the card will see much use. There's not a lot of reason to carry that curse around, except to activate things that care about curses. So that's something to note, but yeah, on that same note, we're actually going to talk about the second curse, which is Curse of Taxation. The cursed player has -1 maximum power. This is a 4-cost cursed relic. 4-cost is not that hard to jump to in certain types of decks. If you want to play like turn 2 Power Stone, turn 3 Curse of Taxation, then you basically deny your opponent the opportunity to ever play a Sandstorm Titan, which could be a thing. I don't really like this card on a lot of different levels. Like I find that like just giving people negative maximum power is not really a great mechanic in terms of like improving gameplay. Like it's really frustrating when you lose power, and something that actually does set up this sort of like power destruction style where you essentially just have this like less power and you actually start having issues with power as a result. This gets to be a little bit on the tricky side. But like overall, like I'm not certain that it's not strong or that it might not be fun to play. Like there is a lot to say that there's a lot to say in Magic that a card that is at 4 that just messes with your opponent's power is not going to be all that good for you, especially since it basically just doesn't actually give you any sort of board advantage or card advantage. But the fact is that it is cheap enough to actually start causing them issues with being able to play the majority of their cards. And in Nightfall decks in particular, where everyone is sort of like drawing a pile of cards, just like being ahead of your opponent in terms of card quality and being able to play stuff later might be a thing that you can actually do things with. There's also, you know, potential for shenanigans. You could figure out ways to duplicate Curse of Taxation, perhaps, if there are cards to support it. If you can ramp to it, it does sort of mess with them quite a bit. I'm not wild about the possibilities with this card. I think that in general the design is just a little bit iffy. It's fine that Justice has this. It definitely should cost 4, because if this card costs any less, then it's pretty problematic for gameplay. So yeah, but it is a curse, so if you're doing like Argenport aggro tempo type stuff and you just sort of cap out at Curse of Taxation, then what you're specifically doing is you're playing 2 drops that turn into 4/3s, you're playing like lots and lots of aggressive Unseen, and then on turn 4 you're just like, I don't want you to harsh rule, why don't you not harsh rule for another turn? And you just do that again and again and again, and you've already got all of your stuff on the board, and your opponent's playing a control deck, and they don't get to harsh rule. So yeah, like there is potential for this card to be useful in very specific scenarios and very specific situations, but overall I'm not a huge fan of it. I do think that curses are interesting, and it's certainly good to have more curses. And I think this is about the exact kind of power level that I want to see negative maximum power at. But I'm not sure if I wanted to see negative maximum power in this game at all. It's certainly something to explore, and I'm glad that they're at least testing it out. All right, next up we have Disjunction. Draw an attachment from your void or kill an enemy attachment. Maybe I should have talked about this one first, because we are talking about the 2 curses, and then we're going to talk about legendary that cares about curses. So keep those 2 curses in mind. But Disjunction is a fast spell that gives you good attachment destruction at 2, and that's not bad at all. This is essentially a ruin, and a ruin at 2 is not actually all that miserable. It's quite good against armory, and I think that there is a decent amount of extra armory hate in this set, which is actually good. Like, armory has been a dominant deck for a pretty long time, and the more like interesting answers that you have to it, the more interaction points that you have with it. Like, I want to see this deck generally be slightly lower tier than it is, just because it has been very, very high tier for a long time, and like we've just always seen armory be a dominant deck in the meta for just forever. So we're seeing some things that are actually particularly bad for armory. Knight is not great for Auric Runehammer. Disjunction is not great for like armory decks in general. I think that it's still gonna like allow armory its space, but it's something to note. Now, Disjunction does allow you to draw an attachment from your void, which means that we can see, of course, 3-color armory with time. And we've actually been seeing a little bit of that lately already. Ikaria Gold is kind of a real thing right now, and Disjunction can actually play around with that idea. Disjunction can also draw extra curses from your void, so like if you are playing around with those attachments, there seems to be a higher number of attachments in this particular set in the Dusk Road, as well as just like a lot of interesting ways to play around with those ideas. And in addition, there are a lot of units and weapons that we have seen, or units that we have seen that care about attachments. A lot of the Rakano cards really care about weapons. A lot of the Feln and Huru cards really care about curses. So Disjunction allows you to repeat curses and repeat relic weapons and repeat actual weapons, and all of those things are actually really useful. And then it also gives you an offensive advantage. Neither of those 2 abilities are extremely powerful on their own for 2, but at a fast spell speed and with the modular ability, I think this card is quite strong and very likely to be played. So yeah, and I love the art on it. I do think that like we see a knife just sort of being taken apart by magic, and it looks really cool. Like they're just knocking it out of the park on art. Okay, so back to that idea of curses. We have our curse, or we have our curse-carrying character, Allo Death Dreamer. Now, Allo Death Dreamer is an unseen, and we do have a lot of Feln Unseen right now, and it is a card that cares about night. It has Summon Nightfall, and it does not actually have any sort of ability that specifically cares about night, but it creates more night and gives you more card draw, which is fairly useful. In addition, it's a flying card with a very good stat line for blocking, so it is good at playing defense in some control-type Unseen decks. And whenever you play a curse, you get to play a 3/3 unseen with a random battle skill. Now, this is an interesting one. So we've already talked a little bit about how caring about curses is an interesting sort of thing that unseen are doing. And I think if we see more curses, we're already going to see some potential value out of Allo Death Dreamer. The Allo Death Dreamer essentially means that says that you draw a small to mediocre card and put it onto the battlefield for every curse that you play, which means that your permafrosts are more valuable, your cowardices are more valuable, your taxations are more valuable if you are playing taxation, which you probably shouldn't. But in addition, like, you can play a wide variety of other curses, and actually getting a unit could be very good. The random battle skill could be very useful, and on a 3/3 unseen, it's pretty reasonable. We've seen a couple of cards, actually, that play unseens with battle skills already. So there is, in fact, a card in Omens, I think it's in the Tale of Horus Travers, that plays an unseen with a battle skill for each battle skill that you play the card on. It's like a mentor ability of some kind. So yeah, there are ways to get a pile of interesting ninjas with random battle skills, and if you are stacking some sort of like unseen style level of like just everything unseen is much better, then I think that there's some potential for this card. That being said, I think we do need to see more cards that care about Unseen. Right now, the only sort of Unseen tribal card that we have seen is the 2/2 that gives Aegis to all Unseen at the start of each of your turns. And I talked about that card a little bit. I wanted to revise something that I said about that card earlier, because while I do think that it is very, very good at protecting you from sweepers, it does notably not protect you from fast spells as well as I was thinking it does, because it is, of course, at the start of your turn that it gives the Aegis. So whenever you play an Unseen, you have one turn where that Unseen is not protected and can be removed. So it's potentially possible to ignore the 2/2, and like that kind of level of that kind of lack of power currently in the Unseen set, I would say that you definitely want some things that really, really care about those 3/3 Unseen before Allo Death Dreamer becomes a good card. Because right now she's not doing a lot immediately, and her stat line, her stats and abilities, none of that like actually just springs out as being particularly good for your board state. Like if you play Allo Death Dreamer on 6, you get an okay blocker that is decent against some stuff. You get a Nightfall trigger, which means that both players are drawing more cards, but you have to pay 6 for this card, so you're not actually playing a lot of cards yourself. You have Flying blockers, which is pretty good, but it's still a 5 health one, and that's not going to block Impending Doom or the Crimson Fire Maw, or a lot of the really, really scary flyers. And like overall, the stat line's a little bit low, but if you can play Allo, keep her out for a turn, get some curses, then you get some like card advantage out of that. So yeah, overall ranked power level seems not great right now, but if there are a lot of ways to strengthen Unseen, then Allo Death Dreamer could actually be completely nuts. Like if there's something that just gives Unseen +2/+2, then Allo's suddenly got a very, very good stat line. She's got a good potential to get like Aegis off of those 2/2s, and she makes a bunch of dudes that are really, really scary. So I think we basically need some more information on what's going on with Unseen before we know if Allo is a good card or not. That being said, I do think that her art and her just general flavor is really, really quite cool. And overall, I'm quite interested in this Curse Matters archetype. So we will see if this is something that can work. All right. So next up, the last one is Great Kiln Titan, an 8 cost that says when you play a relic, deal damage equal to its cost to an enemy, and at the end of your turn, you play the top card of your deck. So I didn't get to see this card actually before I started the video, or before I started recording. This was one of the last spoilers announced, and I'm pretty excited by it. 8 cost is quite good. This card only needs to stick long enough to play the top card of your deck to be extremely beneficial, and that play a relic, deal damage equal to its cost to an enemy is quite nuts as well. So Great Kiln Titan is doing a lot of things quite well, and I'm pretty happy with that result. I want to see this card's face up close, so I'm going to just sort of look at this art real quick. Okay, yeah, sort of a big guy. It's a really interesting Titan design overall. Okay, so 9/7's a good stat line. It's bigger than anything else in the game, I think. I don't think there's a 10 attack unit at the moment. There's a 12/12, but we generally sort of discount that card. So yeah, like as far as 8 drops go, I think it is just bigger than almost anything else that you can see. And 7 health is traditionally above pretty much all forms of removal. There's a lot more 7 health units right now, which is going to sort of decrease the value, I think, of Obliterate in particular. Great Kiln Titan costs 8, but that's quite okay. We actually need a lot more like big 8 drops, and I think that this is a pretty exciting one. The play a relic ability, deal damage equal to its cost to an enemy, means that you get value out of every relic that you get. Not only can you often just outright kill your opponent with relics, like just putting like an obelisk down here deals 4 damage to your opponent, that's not bad at all, but also like dealing damage equal to its cost to an enemy means that you get to remove units from the board for every relic that you play, which gives you an extra card worth of advantage and some actual board advantage out of every relic that you play. Sticking a Great Kiln Titan means bad things for your opponent in any world where you actually have relics. And the other thing that this card does, playing the top card of your deck, is even more important. Even if this card is just playing power off the top of your deck, that is an absolute card's worth of advantage in both board advantage and like card advantage. Like, it is just absolute. It's very, very meaningful to be able to play the top card of your deck. This card works well in warp decks in particular, because you can like warp a bunch of cards off the top of your deck and then just be like, oh, I can't warp this card, that's okay, I'll just play that one off the top of my deck. That doesn't like create a great situation for you, because like, well, I mean, sometimes you will have like a warp card on top that you then draw, but I think overall, like, this is just a really good way to spam out a lot of stuff. If Great Kiln Titan sticks for even one turn, it is an extremely scary card. So yeah, you just play this card when your opponent is tapped out or not using any of their power. If they don't have enough power to kill Great Kiln Titan, or you know that they're not going to be able to do anything, this is your finisher. And it finishes in a very serious way, because not only is it playing the top card of your deck, sometimes it's going to play a relic, and that relic is going to blow up something on your opponent's board. There's so many things that this card is doing to create board advantage that I think it's an absolutely worthwhile addition, and like big red stuff is going to really care about this. You can ramp up to this card with Power Stone. I think that's a pretty solid plan, especially since Great Kiln Titan will use Power Stones and turn them into 2 damage burn spells, which is pretty good way to go about things. You can use Xenon Obelisk with this card if you choose to. I think overall you want to be more focused on playing Great Kiln Titan than playing relics around Great Kiln Titan, but there are a lot of ways to ramp Great Kiln Titan out in red. This is actually the top end that red is looking for right now, because red has a lot of ways to generate power. Milos, Kindle, we have Power Stones and Xenon Obelisks. There's some really good like Praxis stuff that ramps people up. We have Crimson Firemaw, which reduces the cost of cards by 4. Like, there are all sorts of ways in red to temporarily lower the cost of units, or to basically increase the power of them, or increase the amount of power that you have temporarily, like Champion of Impulse. All of those cards lead to a bigger chance of just getting a Great Kiln Titan out early, and then really sort of pushing out that sort of card advantage that you want. So this is the red control card. And I think as a red control card, it is just very, very meaningful. Like, it is a nuts card for ramp decks. It's a nuts card for any deck that can actually get up to that much red. I would play it, I would say, in Ironthorn decks, where you are just trying to ramp to sort of big stuff. Ironthorn needs a little bit more in red, and if you wanted to go for like a red Ironthorn deck that tries to flame blast people out, this would be a really worthy inclusion to throw in. So yeah, like, I think that there's a lot of interesting ways to go about putting out Great Kiln Titan, and if you put him out, you're going to be very, very happy with the results. He looks immediately like a nuts card, and I would suspect that he's part of a cycle. My guess is that there is a Titan for each color, and that these are our sort of big magic giants type thing. I'm excited to see how this guy goes. I think that overall, this is the highest quality card at 8 that we have seen in Grim Road, and I think that he is quite meaningful to the meta. You're gonna see him in decks. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this round of spoiler breakdowns. I think we got a brew video coming for you YouTube folks, so that should show up hopefully tomorrow if I am done with it, and if not, it'll be the day after. Beyond that, thank you to the YouTube folks for watching, and to the Twitch folks, let's get back to some games.